Super.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, games you loved.
Hello, Anthony and Nicola.
Hello there.
Nice to meet you again.
And where are you calling from? Video calling. It looks. Is this a cabin or a shed or?
We call it the cabin.
Yes.
And it's
so imaginative with that. But it's full of lots and lots. It's stuff to do, loads of stuff to do with games,
and
the
films,
80s, films,
props all over the place. We've got everything from Blake 7 teleporter bracelets to 2600 Spectrum, BBC Micro, Commodore 64. I've even got a Dragon 32 out of shot here on the left.
We've also got the $6 million man over there.
Yeah, a lot of planes on the ceiling as well. From when I used to fly radio control planes. Haven't flown for a while.
Roger Moore, Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
It's up here.
A lot of Amiga stuff over there, Spectrum stuff up there. It's basically things that we've collected over the years.
Yeah.
And a lot of the retro stuff has sort of come together over the last 15 years since we made From Bedrooms to Billions, and part of that funding of that movie on Kickstarter was perks and getting signed hardware, signed Spectrum, signed everything. I mean, so we've got these.
That's also my N64 is up there.
Jet Set Willie signed by Matthew Smith, things like that we sort of picked up over the years. Sorry, what were you saying?
My N64 is up there.
Yes, you can't see it from here without me turning the camera around, but yeah, there's a N64 with GoldenEye signed by the GoldenEye team and stuff like that. I've got a Sealed Hero up there.
You've got a history of gaming here, then.
I think so.
I know you pretty well, but we're going to find out more about you, and I might find out more about you today. You never know.
So we might find something about ourselves as well.
But for somebody coming in, it's a good way of kicking off a video, a conversation, chat we're going to have. And you mentioned some things there with things that have been signed and things that you've collected. Somebody doesn't know. Maybe we're going to go back to childhood just yet. We'll do that at the end. We'll go nostalgic. But somebody doesn't know Gracious Films and From Bedrooms to Billions coming in could be, from the UK potentially. Pretty, you're a worldwide figure in terms of film, or it could be in Japan, America, Argentina. What is it all about? It's kind of Alan Partridge. How has this all come about? You've got various bits of memorabilia. You mentioned Matt Smith there. Take us back to just before you started doing Bedrooms to Billions, and some years ago, I guess, isn't it? That beginning part.
2010. We did we finished a film. We got asked that we used to do a lot of. We've done a lot of documentaries over the years. We've done everything from Doctor Who extras, Tom Baker documentaries, on things on comic books, comedy, all sorts of things.
Music industry we've worked in.
And we also got involved about 20 years ago in a lot of live event filming, because the DVD industry was really riding high in the mid 2000s. So, and Blu-ray was obviously just appearing and that sort of thing. So we got involved in doing like sort of what we used to be called VAM, which is value added material, was the way the BBC named it, which is if you're releasing, for example, the Young Ones, you're bringing out a 20th anniversary of the Young Ones, for example, then as well as just what you call vanillas, which is an old term we used to use in the DVD world, which means bland. So if you're just going to put vanilla DVDs out, it just simply means the program and that's it. And if you're lucky, maybe subtitles. So the term vanilla just simply meant get it out. But obviously by the mid 2000s, companies like BBC, ITV and others, Channel 4, needed to add something to do re-releases. They needed to add something more onto those DVDs and those Blu-rays. So we got involved in doing short documentaries for the BBC and ITV and Channel 4, which would be things like, as I said, we mentioned we did the Young Ones 20th anniversary, and we did a load of extras for that. And we got a reputation, believe it or not, of being quick and fast and cheap.
Okay.
So people would say,
is that another thing is like your roles, because obviously I know you're married, or I think you are. I know you're partners.
We are.
But do you do the same thing, or how does that work? What do you do? I know you're a master of all things because you've got your own film business. Are there specific things that one of you will do more than another, or how does that work?
I mean, there is quite a crossover with things. I mean, certainly when we're coming up with ideas, one of us might come up with an idea and then think, oh, I can't quite work out where this is going to go, and then the other one chips in. So we do work very much together on ideas and what we're planning to do. And the same back when Anthony's talking about everything that we were doing for the young ones or for the Saint and stuff like that, we would very often have to come up with an idea and then pitch that in. So it's the same. That hasn't changed. We always do that. Where we do kind of separate a little bit is when we start going into the pre-production part of it. We'll identify who we're going to interview for the project, and then Anthony will very much focus on writing up the questions, doing pre-interviews and getting in touch with whoever we're going to interview. And then when we're in filming, we very much do that together. We both produce and direct, so we do like being there and setting up the whole shot and everything. And then once we go into the post-production, Anthony will get everything on the system, all the rushes of everything that we filmed, and then I'll start putting together a rough edit based on that original idea that we've had. And it very much changes because it's a documentary. You tend to find that when people are saying different things, it takes you off in a different direction. So then I'll put together that rough cut and then I'll show it to Anthony, and then we kind of work out whether things need to change or if we are going in the right direction.
I think probably since we started doing the From Bedrooms to Billions onwards, prior to that, we used to have budgets big enough to hire crew. So what I mean by that is we'd have assistant producers and production assistants and things like that we could basically, and we would exec produce. So a lot of the Doctor Who stuff we used to do, though we used to write a lot of it, we'd exec produce it, which means we'd hire a director and a producer and people, and there'd be a team of people that would work on it, and we'd oversee from sort of from a mountain or a tower above. But we've worked with very, very large crews. What's interesting about From Bedrooms to Billions onwards is they were initially hobby projects that there wasn't enough budget to hire. TV rates of obviously for people working in the industry, they're £200 plus a day, and things like that, which these types of projects can't sustain that. So they kind of were like, we'll do that, and then you end up doing all the jobs. And as Nicola said, I tend to do more of the technical side. So in terms of the how we load things in and checking the resolutions and how we get stuff in, Nicola is a far better editor than I am. And the films themselves, the projects we do, are effectively all edited by Nicola in terms of finishing. So I might offline something. Offlining simply means going through it and chopping out all the bits that you think would be useful. And then I'll put notes on the edit line as to this is a good bit about this is a good bit about the technology, this is a good bit about that, and then Nicola will take it and basically produces her magic and turns it into something actually.
You have to kind of remember everything that people have said when you're editing, because certainly on the project we're editing at the moment, which is to do with the Amiga 500, trying to remember everything that someone said about the Amiga 500 and having no repetition, and that is quite tricky, because obviously everything that we do is driven by the people that we're interviewing. We don't put any voiceover in there because we want them to tell the story, not us.
It's never the intention originally, but it's turned out to be that way. We did toy with
it, but then we thought, no, it's changing it. We weren't there, we never lived through it. So it's nice to have other people guiding us through it.
We didn't create that thing about an ensemble, basically meaning it's interview led, you don't have a narrator. But now it's really, really common. So again, I just want to make sure, I'm not saying we created it. It was definitely around before we started doing it. But now you go onto Amazon, Netflix, most of the documentaries are interview led. There's no narrator. You might have an introduction narrator at the start, but other than that, it's just you're dropped in and guided by the viewer, and that's by the interview. And that's kind of how we sort of found it. We From Bedrooms to Billions was kind of an idea in 2010. So we just finished a movie about burlesque.
Right.
That was, we stepped in.
Very different, yeah.
The art, it was kind of a weird one because we actually I think, I have to double check this actually, but Gracious Films are the last movie ever, the last film ever released by EMI Films. So EMI Films go right the way back to way back, even Warlords of Atlantis was, believe it or not, was an EMI film. Now there's a schlock movie, but we produced this movie called Burlesque Undressed, not knowing anything about burlesque, because we stepped in for the producers that dropped out, and it was originally a Sony project that then EMI took over, and we just finished this Pink Floyd film and EMI just asked us to step in, finish Burlesque Undressed, and then we found ourselves without a prize. We thought it was our first movie, and we thought, oh, and it got a big premiere, and there was a lot of press, and we were like, I like this.
Add to the Burlesque Undressed. It actually initially started as just a live show,
Right.
And then we ended up adding to that interviews. So you had a Modesty Blaze, who was the modern artist, but there's quite a history in burlesque. And so we went to Las Vegas. I mean, we didn't go there. We sent a producer there, and she filmed everything for us. But she interviewed all the older burlesque performers, from
Interesting.
they're like up in their 70s and 80s. These women, they were amazing.
I was looking for a copy of
and
it.
We got to see all the different costumes and everything that they had. So yeah, I think that certainly brought a documentary side to it. So it's the documentary kind of combined with the live performance from a Modesty. So that maybe sowed the seed in terms of, you know, being able to interview people that maybe lived through certain periods in history. And then we did start having this idea about doing something to do with the birth of the British video games. But we were like, how are we going to fund this? Because it's really hard to get grants.
Well, it had already been rejected, hadn't it, by the BBC?
And it's very hard to get funding. You know, you can go to different organisations to try and get funding. It's just really difficult. So I was watching, and I don't normally watch this programme, but Question Time was on one night, and Deborah Meaden was on it.
Oh, wow.
And she was talking about helping small businesses grow and stuff like this. And she went, people don't consider Kickstarter and crowdfunding. And I thought, I've not heard of that. And then just looked it up and said to Anthony, why don't we give this a go? So that kind of...
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Inside it, yeah.
It's a bit of a thing. In fact, I mean, that's an interesting thing, and I'm sure I'll find things out today. Because it's almost like what was the spark that registered the interest? Not just the subject, but why? Why go crowdfunding? You know?
Well, we've always been gamers, always, right from when we met in 1990. And the first thing I did was sold her family my Commodore 64.
You're old enough. You were at school, or what was this?
No, I would have been 17.
Wow, yeah.
You were 16 when we met, and I was 17. And we were both gamers right from the off. You were a Spectrum. You were playing the Spectrum. You also had a Atari 2600 that you were still playing. And I kind of finished using my Commodore 64 and was actually into the Atari ST. My dad was in the music business. Has been pretty much all his life, and he had an Atari ST for the studio at home. It was only a little box for him, but he had a recording studio, and I was using the Atari ST to play various games on at the time, and I was just about to get an Amiga. Met Nicola, and in fact the money that your mum and dad paid my mum and dad went towards my Amiga. Anyway, that's a different story.
So Anthony, really, the Commodore that you have
which
now
is sitting there,
is not your Commodore, it's mine.
That's it in the corner. That's it with the keyboard on it. That's my now.
Well, that's why we got married.
When we got married, it became mine again, and I was still 100 whatever it was quid up from the original sale. But it was we kind of met, and we were always into games. We used to play 2600 a lot.
I really like the little handheld games as well, which I've got. What have we got over there? Where is it? Where's my... there you go. Astro Wars.
I don't want to... maybe we'll cut this out, because we need to make a movie about that, because nobody... And we know Numbskull has done a book on it, funny enough.
On Astro Wars.
On the tabletop gaming world.
Yeah, they're amazing. I love them.
Because it's a fascinating... It's a funny little world, isn't it? It's an enigma.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for.
I agree.
I had one. It was a little. I'm sure it was like the Eddie Shoestring game by Grandstand.
Wow.
Eddie Shoestring? Was it? There was a TV series Shoestring.
That is bizarre.
And I'm sure it was a Grandstand. I remember it like this. Maybe I imagined I was in Shoestring.
I know there's some very strange ones.
I have to check that one. That would be very rare.
It was called Detective Shoestring or something like that.
There is odd ones. My friend Faye has got probably, I reckon, close to the biggest handheld game collection in the world. She's been collecting for about 12 years. Kingdom of Carts. I'll put the link to her, and she would be the person to talk to, because she has got the weirdest little collection of games, like based on TV shows. You know, things like cartoon characters that you've never heard of. She's got the Thomas the Tank Engine grandstand game, which is quite rare.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. They were doing tie-ins, then it might well be.
I'm sure it had something to. I'll have to look it up, but I'm sure it's to do with shoestring.
And then somebody reached out to me from Grandstand. Said my dad was like the marketing director of Grandstand.
Wow.
But unfortunately, a pass. But I've got some bits, and kind of like that was fun. And but it's a segue, I guess, into a couple of things as we're talking. One is you haven't just picked a subject, obviously, and just making a film about it, which is nice to know, everybody. This is truly authentic because you were, playing games before you met, let alone when you met.
Yeah.
But I guess Spectrum, because we were going to meander around into that subject at some point. And obviously there was the Bedrooms to Billions, which is a whole story in itself. Maybe we need a separate 5 hours for that one. But the Spectrum, the Rubber-Keyed Wonder, what a great title. If I say myself, it's really, I don't know, it's whoever came up with that. Nicola, was it you?
Who? Was it me? I think I came up with.
Yeah. It was a good, great
rubber keys, and it was a way of sort of getting across the fact that it was known for, and they're not really rubber. An elastomeric
Doesn't kind of,
which doesn't fall under rubber. So the elastomeric Wonder didn't work, but I think it was just the fact that it's known for its rubber keys. And it was and the other thing was the rubber keys were there to as an advance on the ZX81, but it's still a membrane keyboard. Just with the elastomeric rubber on top of it. And of course, it's such a British story. And it was Clive Sinclair passing away in, I think it was 2022. We were a bit appalled by the news coverage. We in fact, I think we had a little bet, didn't we? We said, I bet they wheel out. They go on about the C5. And, they talk about the calculators, and I think that was the fact, and also the fact that, shouldn't really say this with the Commodore campaign hopefully coming up, but the Commodore 64 got a proper mention on Newsnight on BBC in August that it was 40 years old.
I think you've hit me now. Unfortunately, the way that things work, should we say? We've got friends in the journalistic world. He unfortunately gets buried with that C5 when it comes to his PR. It's just it was the death knell of Sinclair, pretty much. As was told. And it was going to be the one thing that he was going to get as an obituary, and it's a shame because, obviously this is where the film obviously talks in a slightly more pro way about the Spectrum, about Sinclair and what it did for the industry. And, that story needed to be told. It's obviously there's touches on it in Bedrooms to Billions. There's obviously YouTube videos, but you delve deep, and one of the things you said earlier, getting the people who are actually involved in the whole piece is a significant reason why people watch your film, and the pacing of those films as well. And I thought it was all done, but you've come up with another idea. And why are you doing this? Why are you adding more hours on top of the story? Do you think is there more to be told?
There is.
There's lots.
The idea effectively was that last year we decided we're known for our films, and the films take a couple of years to make, and they are very hard to make. There's no getting away from it. They're difficult to make, and it's slightly frustrating that it takes. You can sort of 2 or 3 years go by, and you think, I'd like to be able to have more output. And things that are not necessarily movies that we can tell, and we've built up so much footage over the years.
That is quite normal though with documentaries, that they're not such a quick turnaround. They do take a bit longer.
No, I wasn't. There's a process involved. But I think what I was getting at was that we released a project last year called the Amiga Classic Game Insights, and it was just this way of having sort of 15 or 16 separate, properly edited mini documentaries, all about particular games on the Amiga. And then we did one for the Commodore 64, and they can be turned around much quicker. We draw them from our archives, which is usually stuff that's never been seen before, and we can edit if you're interested in this game or that game, and we sort of thought we were going to do. And obviously, once we'd done the Rubber-Keyed Wonder, which was a movie, we thought, well, we'll do a Spectrum equivalent, a Spectrum Classic Game Insights. But when we looked into it, we sort of thought, well, actually, it'll be a missed opportunity because we've got stories that we explored in the Rubber-Keyed Wonder, which kind of we can sort of continue with those stories in something that sort of, and I always use this as an example. One of the stories on the special edition of the Rubber-Keyed Wonder is Sandy White talking about how he came up with his first game, Ant Attack, how that came about, and that was a huge success for him. And that's about a 35-40 minute documentary in its own right, just about Sandy White on Ant Attack. First game, huge hit, all of this. And then we leave him there.
Yeah.
I thought, well, there is actually more to Sandy's story. How does a young developer that's his first game's come out and it's a whirlwind success? What is it like? What happens? The pressure to do the next game, which was Zombie, and then the game after that. What happened in the life of Sandy White? And we thought, rather than it just being a game making of about Zombie, let's continue that story of where we left off. And that's the case with a number of storylines in the Rubber-Keyed Wonder. Again, what happened to the original engineers that designed the Spectrum, Richard Altwasser and Dr. Steve Vickers? When we left them in the Rubber-Keyed Wonder, they just released the ZX Spectrum, huge success, everything. But what happened to them? Well, we know that they left Sinclair soon after and they created the Jupiter Ace. What happened? Why did they do that? Why did they leave Sinclair? What happened to the Jupiter Ace? All of those.
A lot more with Federico Fagin.
Yeah.
I mean, we've literally touched the tip of the iceberg with the content from him that we've put in the film. You know, there's so much from him. Martin Brennan as well. Allison's surname. Got an Allison surname.
Just say and Allison. Yeah.
Don't say you have to edit this bit. What's the surname?
It's because she was married, you see, and then her name changed. So, but I think the point is
she talks a lot about life inside Sinclair, and there's a funny story that she tells as well when she went there on her first day. So we're hoping to get that in there, but they just wouldn't all work in the film. All these stories, you know. So
you see the point earlier as well. Like it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? You want to make a tight film, the first film. You want to, you've got to keep that pacing, but also I expect, Nicola, you were saying you remember stuff within the film, but then you're using it now.
Yeah.
You're going back to it, aren't you, and extracting the wider story.
And it's quite nice because there's segments that you can just leave that one person talking about. So it works quite nicely. But even with the expansion pack, initially it was only going to be 3 hours. And obviously we want to expand it to 6 hours. But that's simply because there's just so much footage.
Yeah.
Probably could do even more content. There is so much of it. And I think it would be a shame, and this goes right the way across the board with all of our projects, that people don't get to see it. So it's quite nice. That's why we're doing the Classic Game Insights and this expansion pack, because it does mean that we can edit them up nicely and put them out there. I don't like the idea of just putting out the raw footage, because it doesn't really have much context and it doesn't look as good as
you want to edit it. You want to edit it properly, and I think that's, as Nicola touched on, with the expansion pack was originally devised as a 3-hour project and it's now 6, and that kind of happened organically because, like the Denton Designs film, we're able to continue the story from what happened when Imagine went bust in 1984, and some of their most talented developers left and formed Denton Designs. And they went on to do games like Shadowfire and Gift from the Gods and some amazing games like that. But we could just focus just on the games, but better to set a bit of use up a bit more running time with a bit of context about what happened when they worked on Imagine's last game, Bandersnatch. A little bit more insight into that game, and then the founding of Denton Design. So then the running time goes from the original estimated 8 or 9 minutes to 20 minutes.
Of course, yeah.
The number of the projects on there, like Mel Croucher, we're going to be talking about all his early games, not just obviously Des Ex Machina. Sorry, my head's been in the PlayStation today, so suddenly I'm switching to ZX Spectrum. We're going to cover other games that he did, Pymania and things like that, and also the founding of his company. So it allows us to make them as mini documentaries rather than just about a specific game, and that's why the expansion pack will feel like you're watching a number of properly made short movies, all about specific subjects to do with the Spectrum. I think things like the Jupiter Ace would be a good one, because that was again, why did those engineers leave Sinclair? Because they thought they could
Right.
get another Spectrum and make a fortune. You know,
Kind of films. I mean, it's about to sound a little bit weird, but it's like it's so much history here that
Cool,
it's
yeah.
all there. But
Yeah.
anyone who comes along thinks I'd really like to learn about that, and there it is for them to sit and watch it.
It's an encyclopedia of A to Z, and I think people are looking, you know, call it the hobby, retro gaming, for a little bit more depth to they're getting, you know, because dare I say it, you know, there's a regurgitation of content out there to some extent. I mean, it's entertaining sometimes. It can be meme-like or otherwise.
Yeah.
I definitely get involved in a few memes, I have to say. But ultimately, if you're, you know, like looking at, we've talked about Netflix, Amazon, you know, people are, you know, looking for a subject of like one person and focusing on that one subject. And when you've got all that footage, it does seem a shame just to either just dump it on a, you know, you wouldn't do this, I know anyway, but just dump it as footage or just not use it, you know. And I think obviously a lot of feature films have things that don't make the cut, but I expect with this it's even more because you've just got hours.
Yeah, I think that's it. Continuations of storylines. And also these sections needed to be edited properly. They weren't. It wasn't as if we had a sort of plethora of material that we just snicked out of the film and it was just sitting there. It doesn't really work that way. We kind of offline. So once we've got an interview and we know what we want to say, it's a raw interview. And then we put all these markers on the edit line of overlays and things that we're going to need, and then it gets edited up. So it's not like you know, it's already done and it's just a case of dumping it on a disc, and it makes no sense. We've got to create it out of the rushes that we've already got. But it also is a sort of a completionist element of like, right, you know, now people can find out what happened to those stories
and
afterwards.
I mean, there is so much more we can do.
Yeah,
so it's quite nice doing these extra edits.
Yeah,
it's nice.
I'm sure this was a strategy in the beginning, but I suppose I see, you know, Bedrooms to Billions was the it's almost like it told a very full and wide story of obviously 8-bit computing and the evolution into 16 and so on. And now you seem to be drilling very into the subjects, which I think, you know, is just forever, because once you drill into the, you know, a computer, you drill into the game and the person and the company and the so much. It's just so much of it. And
I'll give you an example, actually, if I may, Chris. It's on our Commodore 64 Classic Game Insights Blu-ray, which came out just before Christmas. There's one of the games featured on it is Parallax by Sensible Software. Now, people may not always realize this, but Parallax is Sensible Software's, well, it's their first game published as Sensible Software. There is technically a game that came before that they produced. They made for somebody else that they're not credited on. But the point is, it's Chris and John Hare's first game ever, and it was published by Ocean. And rather than just covering the Parallax bit, we cover about how Sensible got started. How did they get that meeting at Ocean? What was it like when they went to Ocean? But also, because we filmed an interview with Martin Galway for a different project, Martin Galway was working at Ocean, and he was the one that happened to load up the demo when it came into Ocean. And he's the one that recommended that somebody contact those guys. So we were able to take interviews from filmed on different projects and bring them together into one new film.
Sure.
Tell that complete story of how Sensible Software got their start in the games industry, and how it led to them obviously having a very leading all, you know, they go on have an amazing career, Sensible World of Soccer and games like that.
Task Set on there as well.
Task Set's on there as well, yeah.
With Andy Walker, so that was really nice as well.
That
started off as like literally 2 minutes.
Yeah,
it's just going to be focusing on Super Pipeline.
Yeah,
and then it's there's more we can do here about Task Set.
Yeah, I think do you think the fact you're independent gives you more advantage of doing such a thing? The fact you now are, you know, you are doing everything, and I know that you obviously, especially international, you're direct, but you have that difference that you had maybe 20 years where you are the business. Do you think that giving that flexibility, that it's a kind of problem, and it's also an advantage?
You're absolutely right. We
totally.
we did a TV series 2 years ago, Games That Rock the World, which was made for the Roku channel. Now, originally, we worked with a production company that do the sort of big sort of like the what's the penguins documentary they did, and like the big wildlife,
penguins,
the huge wildlife documentary. So we ended up working with them, and we were kind of exec producers and consultants on it. And it was a 4 episodes, and it covered it covered fighting games, platform games, adventure games, and hopefully there'll be more. And the idea is it's very commercial. It's designed for people that don't know a huge amount about games, so the entry level is very low. That was tightly controlled, so as soon as we started to ask for sort of nods towards hardware and other things, it was like, whoa, the audience are not going to understand. So yeah, there was a lot more of a committee element to what went in. Some things we dug our heels in, because we certainly didn't want, certainly when the narrator is saying something about a Commodore 64 and they're showing a PC, we're making a fuss about it and saying, look, we'll get roasted by so there were things we stuck our heels in about, but generally it was decision by committee, and the 4 episodes are done. And with those types of projects, you're dealing with $1 million+ budgets, which is one spoke on a big wheel. To answer your question more clearly, is our independence is an advantage, but it is a double-edged sword, because obviously if we decide to take longer on something, if we've got X finance to make something and we take 4 times longer because we're a bit arty or something like that, then no one's saying, oh, here's a bit of extra money or something. It doesn't really work that way. So there's a balancing act.
And I think you get to a point where you have to be able to say, no, we have to stop now.
We're
pretty good at that. But it is very different when you're working for someone to doing it yourself. But I think that's why we both always like working for ourselves.
And you've done it a long time now. You're not going to just go off on a tangent and sort of go crazy. It must be hard though when you really get into a subject like Spectrum. I know that you obviously admire other hardware and games, but when you get into something, I would find this difficult, as well, where how far is too far? Do you know what I mean? It's,
there's certain things where we sit there and we go, we cannot get really technical about this. So I think we now look at it and think, there's a certain point you can go technically, and then it has to become an extra, because we do have the interviews that we have really become quite technical, and you think, well, we also do want to make sure that our films appeal to someone that maybe doesn't know anything about the subject matter and wants to come in and learn a bit about it and not be bamboozled by stuff that's just so technical that they're not interested in it anymore. So it is finding that balance as well. But as I say, what we try to do now is think we can go so far with that subject, and we'll expand it as an extra if you really want to know. So it's kind of a bit of everything in there for
you're right. I think that's right. They've kind of, in some ways, they've kind of made themselves, because when there was a huge pressure on us when we were doing From Bedroom Civilians, because there wasn't really anything on retro gaming out there. I don't even think there'd been a Kickstarter for a retro gaming book, let alone a movie. And again, I'm not trying to take credit for saying starting the retro scene. That's not what we mean at all. There was plenty of retro things going on prior to From Bedroom Civilians, but certainly not on crowdfunding.
No.
And also on what the expectation was. So initially that From Bedroom Civilians was going to be a 50-minute documentary, about 20 interviews, and we were going to try and sell it into broadcast. And we thought, we'll get the public to fund it, we'll make it, deliver it, and then we'll take that 50-minute documentary and see if we can get a broadcaster interested. And it turned out in the end that we made a 2.5-hour slab of a movie. That's probably a bit unfair, but it was a big film, a long film, and it seemed to go down very, very well. But we kind of felt this pressure that we've got to include this, we must include that, we must include that, and I still can't believe we actually did it.
No,
because I remember how much we procrastinated over that film.
Now, yeah,
it's not. I don't think we procrastinated over another film since. Not in that way. It's been a much more clearer idea.
Kind of finding our feet with the first one, weren't we?
Yeah.
You mentioned the Clive thing earlier, which is interesting, because I'm going to rule out part of this. I had an interesting question, which I'm going to adapt somewhat, because you've already answered it somewhat in that, why did you do it at that particular moment? Obviously, the anniversary aspects of Clive. And then you're not allowed to mention the next in the response, by the way. There's ZX Spectrum next. But why do you think that the Spectrum, the Specky as we call it, still holds like an emotional pull, that people are still attached to it, and it's still relevant. It's still very much of the now. And obviously the Next has highlighted it again, but without the Next being, let's go back a few years before, you know, or just erase on Enrique out of our memories or whatever. But or is it that, you know, I don't know, if you go back to 2015 to now, is it becoming bigger? And I don't want to answer your question here, but
I can give you an answer on that one.
About the spectrum, you know.
Okay, first of all, it's not rocket science with the spectrum. It affected millions of kids in the UK, right? Positively in the majority of cases. When it came out, it felt like the future. And anybody that was born in the 70s, or you know, the 60s or 70s, will remember being at least relatively young when the spectrum appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. Now, I was lucky. I saw the ZX81 first. My dad brought one home for a couple of nights because he works at Casio, and Casio were considering doing their own version, which sort of happened, but more as a calculator. But when the spectrum itself came out, it was because it was so available and so and you know, cheap. A lot of people got it, and it kind of just had this impact. And it just, if you lived through it, you were affected by it. If you played games on it, whether you had a Commodore 64 or a BBC Micro, the spectrum was relevant. The spectrum was always there, and we grew up by it. And of course, it had that. It also had that 90s revival, where it never go away. It had that next generation of people that were born in the 80s, that were now in the early 90s, that were 10, 12 years old, able to use a +2.
Yeah,
this massive catalogue of games that had been out for 10+ years now. So the spectrum had a much longer life through, and Amstrad did a good job. Alan Sugar did a good job in keeping the spectrum propped up. So what you've got is a highly influential piece of technology that influenced millions of kids in a very, very influential decade. The 1980s was the microchip revolution. So yes, the spectrum was part of it. Whether you're into VHSs, Betamax, whatever happened in the 80s, with, you know, shoulder pads, there was so much about the 1980s. When you were there, I remember being through it, as I'm sure you know you remember.
Of course, yeah.
You certainly remember.
Well, I think, speaking, because I remember going out and buying my first Spectrum, and I think for me, every time I think of the Spectrum, it just sends me back to the 80s, being at home, mum and dad. It's that emotional connection that I had with that Spectrum, and still do to this day. There's just something about it that makes me feel so good.
Yeah.
And I'd never had anything like that before.
I mean, it's falling in love with a computer. I was going to draw the comparison of, it's like growing up with the Beatles. If you're you know, you were 16 in 1963, I can't get my dates right. Say Rolling Stones and the Beatles, you know, there was no microchips back then, was there? So your music was everything. But is the Spectrum, could you draw a comparison to say is influential a media as music, that it has that emotional pull, like you say, Nicola? When you see that thing, it's almost like it's not just a games machine.
No,
more than that.
It's the nostalgia of it. And I do think I think everyone's got a connection to something back when they were maybe that age. You know, I'm sure there's people in the 70s that go, "Oh, I remember there's something."
But it was also hands-on.
Yeah.
It wasn't a closed box. It was something that if you wanted to, you could work with it, you could interact with it, you could program it. And I think that was the thing. It would sit there with its keys, and if you wanted to get stuck in, and that's the thing. I think when we all got,
it was intriguing. I think it was like, wow, I can do something like that. I'd never thought that I could sit there and program something in. But my brother bought these magazines with the type-in listings, and he'd left it there, and he'd had a go, and I'm like, right, I'm going to have a go at that, and turned it on and started doing it. And I spent the entire day, I'd spend days actually sitting there typing in these listings. I loved it. And it just makes me feel warm and fuzzy.
I will aim a question back at you. We were talking the cultural impact of the ZX Spectrum. So regardless of what it was, it affected millions of people in the UK, right? Is there another? You just mentioned the Beatles, right? In just focusing only on British cultural history. I know there'll be people out there that think this is a ridiculous comparison, but you got the Beatles. What else was there that
Well, I
affected
think
so many people?
Britpop in the 90s. You know, it was between 90, I think, 95, 94 to 98 was British pop music.
Yeah.
It had that 4-year period. I remember going to see Nebworth, Oasis, and and that was just madness. It was just on a level.
But I'm talking about a cultural impact. So the Beatles in the 60s had a huge impact culturally on the British music scene. What else was there in terms, not just music,
in the 80s or
spectrum? If you go from the 60s to today, right? Yes, there were important elements, whether you have breakthroughs in medical science, but I'm talking about a cultural impact that affected millions of people. I would say the spectrum and the Beatles fall into the same category.
I think, yeah, if you're thinking about a single thing, because obviously Britpop was many bands as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that just, the Beatles thing came into my head because of the UK aspect. If you ask the average American, they ain't going to say Spectrum, are they? Obviously,
that's why I know. I'm focusing just on the UK and the impact of a cultural upheaval almost.
And I think that the point of Spectrum is that I knew one guy who had a Commodore 64 at school. That was it. Everybody had a Spectrum.
Yeah.
Everybody had a Spectrum. Now, a few people had consoles, had a Master System, and a few friends who got Master Systems, but they had a Spectrum as well, or they got it just beforehand, because it was just like, I can't imagine what other things were on that level as a UK only. Do you know what I mean? Like you say, Transformers, huge, global. Everybody had a Transformer, blah blah blah, as a toy. It was a massive thing. But as a UK based thing, I really struggle. Apart from, obviously, you know, the Beatles was a global phenomenon, but it was a UK phenomenon. Obviously, so they played here as well as overseas, but they were essentially obviously from the UK. So and that's why I think that story needs to be further developed. I'm not just saying it just sitting across the way to me, because when you have something as big as that, and the Beatles, how many documentaries can still be made? Luckily we still have a few of the guys alive, and I bet there's stories from them or stories from people who work with them that still haven't been told. And unfortunately, you have to broach that subject. You have to get it out of the guys before they pass.
Yeah.
Some of this stuff, because they've pretty forgotten. How do you do that? How do you drop that seed without them bawling their eyes out? Because I know that you've had not issues, but you've had situations where it must get very emotional.
It does. It's
You do a lot of like pre-interviews.
I do pre-interviews, but what I always do is I lead people. You've got to do your research. I think if you're expecting somebody to talk about their life, I've been lucky. Over my time, Hideo Kojima, I've interviewed some major games developers, and when they detect that you're just a surface level interview, they kind of just reel out the same old answers that they would do for the EPKs and things like that. When you start asking them questions about their childhood, and you've researched it, and you're going, well, your first computer was this. Did you ever play any? And they have to think. And by getting them to start at the very start of their life, and most people have got warm, fuzzy memories about their childhood. I remember Nolan Bushnell. I got him talking about ham radio for ages.
Well, there you go.
And that got him
that nostalgia.
And that got him loose. Yeah. That loosened him up.
Yeah,
because he was quite sort of ready to reel out the usual Atari stuff.
Yeah, of course.
He said, "No, talk about ham radio." Oh, what? When did you build your first one? What? And he got really into it. And that's just an example. You tend to find some people, and the people that are very, very good at talking, we turn things up on their head. So the thing that they're most used to talking about gets delayed, so that we talk about things that they're not used to. And that kind of leads to a better, more in-depth interview. Most of our interviews are 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it's rare that sometimes, you sort of look at it and think, wow, we did the whole thing in 50 minutes. But that might be because they're brilliant speakers and they could just reel it all out. But
I think we try and make it an enjoyable experience for them as well.
Of course.
No, but I guess for some of them,
you do get that pain.
Yeah, that we've haven't been interviewed. Maybe I've been like 1 or 2 interviews about their life. And
Steve Turner talking about the end of Graph Gold was quite painful. You could see that he was struggling quite rightly, because it was his life. It meant it was his mortgage. It was his taken all this risk to take the company into the era of the PlayStation, and it was not working.
Right.
And this was more than, and that's I think we said this in the past to people actually, is that when we started making From Bedrooms to Billions, we kind of had to sort of change tact a little bit, because we realized that there's a reason why people have left the industry.
Right.
They got ripped off, they got fingers burnt, or whatever the reason is. But these are people's lives.
Yes. Yes.
To them, it's deadly serious, you know.
Yeah.
And you might want to, and they're used to somebody coming up and saying, "Oh, tell me about," like with Matthew Smith, "Tell me about Jet Set Willie." Well, Jet Set Willie makes Matthew feel really uncomfortable, because that was a period of his life where he started to come apart.
Yes, of course. I mean, I suppose you get on the emotion side, just stick to the spectrum. Obviously, Matthew, that's where I'll move, because he is, you know, he's Jet Set Willie. It's just what a game. I suppose you're getting the elation and the kind of negativity, or the sort of you get both sides. You must get people who get hyper excited because you've gone back to a time where, and I know you know there's stories about people throwing money on the bed when they've made it, and you know that sort of, and then you get the dark and the light.
Yeah.
With, aren't you really?
And certain characters.
Yeah.
You keep hearing of certain characters, certain people, whose names keep cropping up. And you think, that's interesting. And
any nice stories for the spectrum? Like kind of, you know, any goal? Huh?
Did you say love stories? Sorry.
Yeah. Any love stories? Golden stories?
Trying to think.
I mean, apart from the success of everything that came with many of the, you know, the publishers and developers of the time.
Yeah.
So there was a huge ride, wasn't there? I mean, I don't know what the year was. 1983 was probably the year of the Spectrum. 84.
83, 84. But this is the thing. Alan Sugar sold a lot of units of the +2 and well, I don't know so much about the +3, but the +2 was a great, you know, great system. He was able to sell it cheaply. But I think that 83, 84 era was where, you know, we started seeing more of the Ultimate Play the Game. I mean, that's the thing. You say 84, but when you think about the quality of games that continued to come out through the 80s, and of course, once you had developed, I think one of the surprising things I took from making the Rubber-Keyed Wonder and From Bedrooms to Billions, where there are a lot of Spectrum developers, is how many of them were not programming on the Spectrum. They were either working on a PC. A classic was an Einstein. If you remember the Taytone Einstein computers, and you sort of think, oh, you know, and I always remember was it Chase HQ being made on Atari ST,
okay,
and a PC, and thinking, I wonder if the Spectrum fans are going to be so. But you realise actually that it still requires talent to make it. You might be, and you then, as you sort of learn more, because even us, we made From Bedrooms to Billions. We were consumers with a little bit of technical knowledge, and we learned our technical knowledge from doing all these interviews, and you sort of learn and doing research really. And I remember thinking, oh, actually, it does require real talent to make these games. It's not just something randomly. I always love the story of Ray Kazar saying to the Atari engineers in 1980, the Atari 2600 engineers who had just worked it out, 5 of them worked out, hang on a minute, Warner Brothers made a massive profit last year, and the 5 of ours are responsible for 70% of their profit. You know, maybe we should ask for a little royalty. And then being sent out of Ray Kazar's office in Atari saying you're a dime a dozen, you know, there's people. I mean,
I think that's the part I like about our films, actually, is that those stories in the background, that roller coaster, and how it really affected people. Some people just rode through it and continued the success. But others, it really affected them, like, you know, to nervous breakdowns, leaving the industry and everything. And it's nice to maybe highlight that a little bit, that it's not all plain sailing. It's really difficult. And
you've got a responsibility. I also remember Bruce Everest on the premiere of From Bedrooms to Billions, which was October 2014, which was the last ever event held at Earl's Court. It got bulldozed. You were there. It got bulldozed 2 days later on Monday. But Bruce Everest said to me after the premiere, he goes, "You're the keeper of the knowledge now." I said, "You've done all these interviews." And he said, don't forget that you've got all this knowledge of the British industry. You've captured it in this time, and I remember feeling a sense of responsibility after that.
There's quite a few people we've interviewed that have passed away as well, and you think, well, we have got like so much material of them, and that their memory will live on, if you like.
That was hard editing Archer recently, Archer McLean recently.
We interviewed Archer about 3 times. And there's a segment we've not shown. He did a little bit all about his collection of digital watches. And I don't think we've ever shown that.
We'll have to put that out one day.
Yeah.
He collected calculators, digital watches. He collected a lot of things, arcade machines, obviously, but he had a huge digital watch collection.
He enjoyed an interview by you 5 times.
He was lovely. I used to like meeting up with Archer.
Well, we did I think we told this story recently, actually, but before we made From Bedrooms to Billions, we wrote to Atari that had just literally restarted again, and said, do you need anybody? Because we were used to doing VAM as we took value-added material. We thought, well, the games industry doesn't sort of do that sort of thing. So we wrote to Atari, said, would you like somebody to make short films about all your classics? And they wrote back and said, yes. And we ended up interviewing, like Star Raiders, and interviewed Doug Neubauer and Missile Command and Asteroids, Ed Log, and we interviewed
Tony Temple, didn't we?
Tony Temple, and we did these films for Atari, and they went bang. They went back. Well, that iteration of Atari collapsed, and that's in that 2010 filming. We met Paul Drury and did an interview with him, and then through him we met Archer McLean. We went to his house, and he's got a huge Atari collection. And I did show this the other night, and I'll show it to you as well. This is Archer McLean's original copy of Star Raiders for the Atari. It's a cartridge for the Atari 800, and he bought this in 1980 with his Atari 800. And this game was what got Archer McLean into the games industry, and he gave it to us. And as I said the other night, so sorry to repeat the same story, but it was one of these things when he handed it to us, I sort of thought, do you really want to give that to us? That's really. Now I'm so glad we cherish it.
We had a really fun day with Archer once. We were going to an exhibition at Excel in London.
Yeah, Ideal Home or something, wasn't it?
Yeah. I can't remember what we were going there for to look at now, but he came and picked us up. So he had a Tesla, didn't he?
Got a delivery of the first model Tesla.
It was a 2-seater, so one of us could go with him, and the other one drove like behind and that. And it was so lovely with him. So you drove there with him, didn't you? My God, he went fast.
And you drove back with him.
Yeah, but it was such a great ride in this car. And then when we got to the XL, he went, I've got to plug the car in. And there was like a building site at the side of the XL, wasn't there? Yeah. So he went, I know where I can plug in. He parked, climbed over the fence where all the like the generator must have been and everything, pulled their plug out and plugged his car in.
And it's one of those,
went off to the XL.
Those locking, those proper professional plugs, the ones you can't use in your. So it's got the cap on the end of it. You have to lift up the industrial one. Yeah. And he plugged it straight into the ceiling. He unplugged one of the lights from in the building site and plugged it in there. He said, it'll only take a couple of hours. They'll never notice.
And off we went to Excel.
And that was I was learning all about Archer.
Yeah. But, it was a wonderful day. And then then I was in the car coming back with him, and I was pregnant with Jessica at the time. And we really had a good drive back, didn't we?
Yeah. Yeah, it was the first time ever in the Tesla, I think. Probably.
It was a really nice car.
But it's people like Archer McLean, and there's been a few people that have passed away since we made From Bedrooms to Billions, and you sort of feel it's nice. It was nice to put more stuff out with Archer last year.
Yeah.
There's a few more bits we've got in mind in the future. We've
got Ben Daglish as well.
Yeah, poor old Ben. Ben was so supportive of From Bedrooms to Billions as well. He worked on the soundtrack with Max Hall and Rob Hubbard, and of course, Rob Hubbard's still alive, by the way, if he's listening. Sorry, Rob, I'm insinuating that you passed on, but we met a lot of great people, and we realised, in fact, Rob Hubbard's the classic example. When we were making From Bedrooms to Billions, Rob did not want to be in the film.
Right.
And literally, it was we used to have this rule, which was three times and you're out. So we'll ask 3 times, and on the third time, if somebody doesn't say yes the third time, we won't bother them anymore. Rob was on the third one. And he went, oh, all right, I'll do it. Because what we discovered was if we can get someone on the phone, and then they get to talk to us, and at the end of the call, it's like, well, the interview will just be like this. You tend to find, I don't think I've had a single occasion, once we've got them onto either a Zoom or a phone call, we usually always get them to agree to do the interview.
Cool.
I think that's the really important part, is that pre-interview.
Yeah.
For explaining what you're going to do, and also all the questions are sent to them before the interview as well, so they do get a bit of a heads up, so they know what's coming, because that helps relax them as well.
Because you're not trying to set them up.
No, you want the best you can get out of them. So by doing that, it all helps. Yeah.
Yeah, we might need to do a bit of research, a bit of thinking. I mean, some of these stories go way back, in terms of, you know, they're, especially if they've blocked it out as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no point hitting a brick wall for an hour and sitting there going, oh, I don't even get to that. Whereas if you're giving them a bit of notice,
they can.
Then you can. Sometimes we'll put like the iPhone was very handy making from bedrooms, because I was able to go to YouTube and put a game up, because, you know, I remember a few people saying, I just don't remember. And as soon as you put the game on, you put the game up, they're like, oh, I remember. And then suddenly you get all these great. So some people just remember it all anyway.
But I think the other fun part of it is you can prepare that interview, you can come up with all your questions, but then when you're interviewing them, sometimes there's some real gems that come out that you don't expect. And I think that's kind of what happens with the films then, because you think, well, I've got this idea in mind what we're going to do, where we're going to take the film, but then someone might come out with something and think, I didn't even know that, and then that just takes you on another tangent, you know.
And also, again, going back to From Bedrooms to Billions, we had to keep filming interviews because what happened to the British industry was unclear. There hadn't been, by the way, there was no book. It wasn't as if we could read a book and go, right, we know it all now.
Yeah, it's an exploration, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. There was no YouTube videos on it. There was no nothing. We did not know. We genuinely, so it's kind of the reason we made the Amiga years and then the PlayStation revolution afterwards, because they were so effective. They were so relevant to what happened to the British industry. If you didn't make the jump, so either the 8-bit heroes, as it were, didn't make the 16-bit jump, and fell that way, or they did successfully make the 16-bit jump and then fell then when the PlayStation came along, or they found themselves outside a walled garden created by Nintendo and Sega in the early 90s. And the other thing about the early 90s was games making got very depressing, because once you were locked into the cartridge model, which the PlayStation helped break, you realize you had a lot of people just literally just putting their hands up saying, can I develop a license? Because it was all licensing because of people hedging their bets.
It's a very good segue. Actually, straight to interrupt. I'm waiting for doing this question, but you've just led me to it.
There you go.
So, very much, I guess, relevant for both parts of the subject here is that what parallels, you know, between the bedroom coder and the indie scene now is happening.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually.
We talked about that like pinch point where it wasn't happening, but have we gone full envelope, or is there still time to come? You know, there's lots of going on economically as well that's affecting this.
Yeah.
Are we back? Are we going full circle again?
Well, I think in a funny sort of way, you've got a similar situation to the music industry, what's happening at the moment, which is you might be the next Eric Clapton, but you're up there. The whole market is saturated, and anyone can release a single or an album. Now, if you go back to the early 1980s, if you were good, you know, that's the thing. You know, if you did a good game and you got it in front of the right publisher, the likelihood is it would get published. And if they did their job properly as a publisher, a lot of people would buy it and you could make a living. I personally have never met a game developer. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I've never met a game developer ever that was in it for the money. Because the money comes along as part of the success of you being a good games developer.
Yeah.
So it was always the love to make a great game was first, and success comes if, you know, there's a few things that it's not always guaranteed.
But would you say though that it's maybe changing what people want as well? They don't want all these AAA games. Are people coming away from that and thinking, I want something a little bit like, I don't get time to play AAA games. I just don't have the time to do it. So I'd like something. What appealed to me for games back in the 80s and 90s, and they were a little bit more I could dip in, maybe a little bit more and play. Whereas now I have to invest a lot of time.
But luckily, those games, so don't forget, those games that were developed in the early 80s onwards were technically AAA, because the developer was pushing it to the very limits of what
I'm not saying they're not
could do.
AAA in terms of I'm just in the fact that I could just play it for a little while and then stop.
Quickly, yeah.
Whereas now it's such an investment of time. So I do wonder if people are changing a little bit and thinking, because obviously you got mobile indie
games. Indie games don't need to look retro, do they? Don't to be an indie game. It can be a very smoothed out, But it's like you say, Nicola. It's about the amount of time that you're investing. The open worlds of some of these big games. You've got to have 100 hours plus, and also deep pockets. Let's not veer away from the subject. You've got to buy that DLC and buy those extra emblems or whatever you might have to add to it, which is fine. I mean, each to their own. And on that subject, people love those things, but it's a completely different investment of time and money to an indie game. I was thinking about indie games specifically now that didn't perhaps exist certainly 20 years ago, 25 years ago, back 30 years ago. What was the indie gaming scene like?
That was the same thing. It was self-publishing. You had people. Jeff Minter, you could argue, was an indie gamer. He's always has been.
He was
like, has been, by the way. I meant he always has been.
Oh yeah, he's stuck to his craft, doesn't he? He won't move, as we know.
He remained independent,
yes.
and he didn't know anything else.
No,
I'll make a game and I'll publish it through my label.
And is it easy for games now to be published by an independent? I'll tell you a really good game actually that I must give it a plug. Is Unraveled. I played it with Jessica, and it was a really nice game about these two little characters that are connected by a little bit of thread. Yeah, and it's so nice. The music's nice, and we just played it. We played it over the course of like a couple of weeks, and it was so much fun. It was really, and I could dip in and just have a little game of that. It was nice. Yeah, and I think it's done very well, that game.
As I was saying, obviously with Simon Butler, for example, I've always been refreshed by how he embraces all new talent, new gaming. He's not got that sycophantic, all the old days were the best. And I said, you've got quite a unique view, because you could easily say that the old days are the best, but you're not. You embrace all new stuff that comes out, and I think that's the thing. It's having that hunger to see new ideas. We don't know what's the games industry itself is an ever-changing medium. As soon as you start pigeonholing it and saying, that's that and that's that, you're kind of creating rigid barriers that you've got to stick with. And that's kind of another thing we're in now. We've got every game is categorized like the music industry does for music. We're trying to get that, because marketing people need things to be in certain boxes in order to sell them correctly. And
probably film to a certain extent as well.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a lot of film is big blockbusters, but I think that there's some really great independent movies out there that maybe don't always get seen.
Well, it starts to squeeze it. I mean, it's people making independent films. It's they're finding different ways, different paths.
Yeah.
There's there's a little bit of anti-corporate out there where I think people are looking for something that isn't commercialized. Not aside from the quality aspect with some of this stuff that gets put out. They're actually looking for somebody like a two-person team, a small team that's got something, and following the story of how you've done it. It's otherwise it's ivory tower, and you just pops out and it's at the cinema, and if it's not good, it's very disappointing. Whereas following people on the journey for filmmaking is as much why people love Kickstarter. Why they like independent talent, whatever it might be, music, TV, perhaps more difficult, but video games. They want to sort of almost see the pain sometimes that people have gone through to kind of make that thing pop out the other side. They're less forgiving of the big boys, as certain games, won't name any of them, but I think we know a few. Cyberpunk took a massive beating, obviously, we know that. The games on the AAA side, they cannot make an error these days from the punter's point of view, and from the studio and the marketing point of view. Not saying that you can allow errors for indie games. In fact, you probably don't, because they're just made in a different way to the bigger stuff. Well,
Ubisoft are suffering now because their AAAs have just missed the mark.
Yeah, I hope they bring out Rayman. I think that's the rumor going on at the moment, that we could see an anniversary edition.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's a tricky one. Sometimes also bringing things back. Prince of Persia they brought back, and obviously they kind of canned that as well. So I think retro is very how can you put it? It's very scientific. So there's a science to bringing out a good retro game, and it definitely needs to look pixelated.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. It's very difficult to create a modern version of what was originally known for its 8-bit look style, or even 16-bit style, to kind of reflect that. And I think it's interesting, if you ever got that massive budget, I'm sure you'd wouldn't say no. If somebody came along and dropped, I don't know, £50 million to make a video games, would it actually be good? Would it just
be documentary or video game?
Would it just be like lots of special effects? Would it be hard to maintain that level of to the knuckle approach?
Constraints breed innovation, isn't it? Where that's when you go back through the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, the developers were developing to the limit of the hardware they had at the time, and the constraints they faced often created innovations. Sometimes I use an example. John Carpenter is one of my favorite film directors.
I was going to say that.
And he talked extensively about the fact that where he struggled was when he suddenly got big budgets. When he suddenly had big budgets and he wasn't trying to sellotape things together and trying to do things on the cheap, and and had to keep thinking. He said when suddenly somebody was bringing him his coffee and stuff like that, he reckons he struggled. Though I still think the Thing is one of the greatest movies ever made, probably the best movie, and he made that on the biggest budget he ever had. So maybe what he's just said goes out the window, but certainly with his other films, Village of the Children of the Damned, and some of the other films he made with big budgets weren't the same. And I think maybe that's the case. I mean, with us, if we had a bigger budget for our documentaries, we could just probably the biggest effect we would have is we could turn stuff around much faster.
Of course.
Because if you think about lining up interviews, like if the Commodore 64 film comes off, if that successfully funds, even the lining up of interviews takes months. If it's two of us, if we had a couple of people helping us, we can task them with setting up those interview dates and all of that, and that's a sort of assistant producer role. But in film, they're taking £200 a day.
There's a middle ground, which is why we still need people to empty their pockets for the expansion pack and join the Commodore 64. There's nearly 1,000 people, I think, already interested, signed up.
It's close to 1,000. We want it to be 2,000 before we launch.
Okay.
Because we'd rather do the campaign in 30 days and spend the time getting the people aware of it beforehand.
Right. Okay.
I think it is like you touched on something about where people get to learn a little bit about what the whole process is, which is quite nice through Kickstarter. That we do enjoy with doing our updates and say everything that we're doing and try and be as honest as possible. And that is all part of Kickstarter, that things can take longer, things evolve. You might get an opportunity to interview someone that you couldn't at the beginning. You think, oh no, I'm gonna go and interview them because that's really gonna make this film a lot better having them in there. So I quite enjoy that process, don't we, about talking to people. It's nice, and it's nice hearing that people are liking what we're doing is always really nice, because obviously it is just servers in an office working away, and you're quite isolated from it sometimes. So when you do put something out there, it's nice to get a bit of positive feedback. Obviously not everyone's going to like what you do.
That's a nice sentiment. Do you hear any fan stories about the projects you've done? People, have you had any nice unexpected or unusual or
really, really lovely.
We've had so many, haven't we? We've started to collect them now, because some of them drifted into the ether. You get an email. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just saying we have had a lot of fan mail over the years in forms of emails or comments or messages.
Oh, also we've had messages from people where they've been quite low, and they've watched our films, and it's given them a real lift and maybe pushed them to go off and go into the games industry or do something, but it just made them feel quite nice. Maybe that nostalgia part of it. But we've had some really lovely messages, and that makes it all worthwhile. If it just lift someone's spirits.
People will write and say that they think the work that we're doing is really important, and we sense that responsibility, you know, because we sort of sense that there is an audience for our stuff, and you know, we want to make sure we stick to sort of our own, you know, if we wouldn't put it out if we don't like it type thing. And we're mortified if there's ever a piece of archive that shouldn't be in there. Like I released something recently that I thought was Commodore Germany, and it was actually it was Commodore America, and I was absolutely furious with myself. But it didn't go in out in a film. It was in an update, and that's the kind of thing about the updates. It can be funny. You know, you get funny comments, and you sort of have a bit of banter with people. But I think there is that sense of responsibility that, you know, we are chronicling gaming history. You know, we're shooting interviews, and some of these people are not around anymore, and we're covering their entire lives, and we want to sort of be respectful of that. But the fan mail will be things like, I was in tears at the end of your film because it brought back memories of when I sit and play my Spectrum with my dad, or it will trigger some nostalgic memory or a time that was very important to them. And I think that goes back to what we were saying about the Spectrum at the start of this interview, is that you were dealing with a piece of technology, whatever it was, whether it was music, whether it was a piece of a fashion or something. The Spectrum hit at just the right time for a particular age group that embraced it, and it affected millions of kids in the UK. And that's why it's so important to us, because as we've got older and we've played games on all sorts of other, whether it be PC or other consoles or whatever it is, we still remember those days when we first discovered something that really got us into it. And don't forget, Spectrum, you had Crash, you had other magazines, there was a whole hobby, whole industry to support that hobby that you felt part of. You felt part of this, you know. I don't think we consider ourselves geeks.
Talking about that with the magazines, that's a really nice bit in the Rubber-Keyed Wonder I really like, is that we could also mention Roger and Ollie in there. That was really nice. That kind of just come together. We were like, yeah, we sat there and thought we could get Roger and Ollie in this part of the film, and then it just was really nice. Part of the story. Quite emotional at the end of that.
Obviously, those interviews were shot From Bedrooms to Billions, but the interviews are very long. Talk about how they got in that, you know, how they started out, and way before Newsfield, you know, how they wanted to work in film and all this sort of stuff. But it was amazing how there were these two fantastic comments that both Roger and Ollie made that never went into From Bedrooms to Billions, that was specifically about the Spectrum, and it's like that film was waiting for them.
Yeah.
And
so that was really nice.
It was lovely. In fact, the last conversation I ever had with Oliver Frey, he said he was unfortunately not too ill to actually do an original piece of art, because you may have noticed that the From Bedrooms to Billions trilogy, From Bedrooms to Billions, the Amiga years, and the PlayStation Revolution, if you back the Kickstarter version, you would have had the Oliver Frey artwork that he designed specially. In fact, he designed 4 covers for us, and obviously we went back to him about the Rubber-Keyed Wonder, and he couldn't do it, but he said, if there's any of my artwork that you want to use, and that's why we ended up using the 2 bits of
joystick.
Yeah, he called them calendar art because they were originally for Zap, a Crash calendar, but he let us use them, and they ended up going on the slipcase for that version, the pre-release version. Yes.
I'll do the wrap up of the weather links and how you're going to do all the promo bit. We'll lead to the end, guys, because that's how we roll. We've not been too. Just been lovely to chat, really. But I'm now going to throw a weird one at you. I did a weird one with Enrique, where I asked him about if you're a monkey and I was your partner on a desert island, what would you play? I won't be doing that one. You threw him completely. But I am now Doc Brown from Back to the Future, without the wild hair, and but I have the DeLorean. So I'm sending you both back to your childhood, and whatever. I don't want to embarrass, especially the lady in the room here. That might be. Send you back to when you were 12, maybe 12 to 15, should we say? And I've sent you back to the 1980s or 90s for Nicola. What 3 games would you go to the local computer shop once you bought a copy of Crash on a Saturday morning? You've gone back as a kid, not knowing anything, but I've given you a pocket full of money. And what 3 games would you go and buy at the height of the Spectrum gaming?
So I'm a geek. I'm going to have to ask for
and you can keep them now, and they'll be sealed.
I'm trying to look at. I've got my collection behind me here. It's
Do they have to be Spectrum games?
It can be the one that got away, the one you didn't get. It doesn't necessarily have to be the thing that you did get as well.
Well, you know, I've got this like thing about Chamber of Horrors, which no one has ever heard. I don't know how I got this game, but I bought that in a.
Where is it?
Where is it?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
It's a picture.
that's a picture of Rob Hubbard there. Here it is.
4D Timescape was one that should be over
There it is.
Yeah, and there's the other one next to it. The one next to it I'll have as well, and Grid Runner. You grab the one next to it. So these are my actual. Yeah. Oh my god.
Those three are there.
Right. 4D arcade adventure. Quicksilver. I don't know. It's a. Yeah, these are my original games. Yeah, Chamber of Horrors.
Well, I haven't seen that one.
This is 4D Timegate.
Yeah.
We featured this in the film.
Yeah. And Grid Runner.
Interesting. Lovely art.
Yeah. But I also, my mum was used to get books from the Leisure Circle,
Okay.
and then the Leisure Circle started selling games, and she got me. Is it The Hobbit?
Yes,
The
which is
Hobbit,
around it somewhere.
and so you got the book, and you got the game with it. I don't think I ever played it. I think I was just blown away by the fact that game came with a book.
Mm.
But when that was my big thing.
Who's Chamber of Horrors by? I don't want to insult you.
There's a game called A Chamber of Horrors.
Yeah, this is it.
I loved it. I
So
played it for hours.
This has been plugged so many times. Do you know this was even plugged on CNN? We did an interview on CNN.
Whenever I get a chance.
Richard Quest. So we're on CNN Money talking about the Rubber-Keyed Wonder. Nicola's talking about Chamber of Horrors.
Wow.
And it's by Amiga. Not for the Amiga. It was by. I can't. I handwrite.
But I can't read.
Can you read the developer's name there?
It was. Oh, hang on. I'm going to put my glasses
But
on.
it's at that point now where I need a microscope to read stuff.
No, it's fine. I mean, there's not many horror games from Spectrum, right?
Rolf.
P. Rolf.
So
Okay.
P. Rolf is out there.
You've made the game, but
I
Nicola
did
loves.
P. Rolf.
It could be a female. It's no offense in any way, but it's more unlikely. But it's
But I think what attracted me to this game was the artwork. I think the artwork
Well, yeah, this is it.
brilliant. And so really, I never read the back of the games. I would just stand there because it was the carousel and just think that looks nice. That picture, that'll do. I'm like that with bottles of wine as well. If a bottle of wine looks nice.
I think that's the thing. It doesn't necessarily. No offense. I'm not offending the creator of Chamber of Horrors, but your favorite games are not necessarily the best games ever made. They might have some nostalgic hit for you. Like for me, Hero on the Commodore 64 is up absolutely up, and I love Bruce Lee. I think they're just simply games, and probably my favorite game of all time would probably be Mercenary by Paul Wokes, because that was one of the few games that I wasn't very good at mapping. I wasn't very good at games that were like Mercenary, where you had to I never finished Lords of Midnight.
Right.
So games that were
Power, yeah.
Whereas Mercenary was one of the few games. I've got it over there actually. You can't quite see it, but it's in the corner. Paul Wokes was, to me, a genius. He did Encounter, and then started out as an Atari 800 programmer. In fact, he did all those games on the Atari 800 first, and he did so. Probably my number one would have to be Mercenary, and then Bruce Lee and Hero. They were just games I would fire up. I think I used to call the 5-minute fire up. Back in the day, to load a game 5 minutes. So, and you wanted to play a game for 5 or 10 minutes until you got bored. There'd be certain go-to games that you always got 10 minutes if you're waiting for something, 5 minutes to fire it up. And Impossible Mission was another one as well for me. But I grew up with the Commodore 64.
Yeah, it's good having you both.
Yeah. But I used to think I was quite technical because I had the tape player. I know everyone did this, but at the time I thought it was just me. That you used to adjust the precision screwdriver. And I thought, doing this, and it was always done by the sound and everything.
How did you find out about that though? Because I
have no idea. I think it's probably my brother told me. You just have to tweak that because it'll sound different. Because he used to read all the magazines.
Yeah,
whereas I was really impatient. I would just want to play it and not read anything.
I mean, when the Plus2 came out, it was a game changer, wasn't it? Rather than messing around, it's so frustrating.
Has it not got a head adjustment on it? It's got. I'm looking at one now. You see the Plus2 behind us. I'm pointing at it. There is a hole for the head adjustment on it.
Nice.
but nothing can beat that one there.
No, that's the one.
Yeah. And also the fact that it never had an off switch. And I remember I'd really forgotten about that until we started doing the film. I thought, oh yeah, I used to just pull the lead out the back. And then by the end, it was held together by a bit of sellotape because it was.
Well, I had a lot of friends that had the Spectrum, and I was playing on the Spectrum regularly because there'd be mates of mine. I remember playing virtually every great Spectrum game I played at the time, because my next door neighbour, everybody had a Spectrum. I was the only Commodore, and that was only because Dad worked for Commodore for a little while. So he got the whole thing, disk drive, monitor, came home with it, but no cassette tape player, which drove me mad because I kept saying, Dad, I need the cassette player. I can't play any games because the disc games are too expensive, and no one's got any disc games. So eventually got that, but I was playing through obviously the Spectrum at friend's house and everything. And I think the thing was, I always remember was the smell of the Spectrum when it had been on for a while. I think everyone's got that smell ingrained in their brain. You can't describe it. It's just that sort of heated plastic.
Yeah.
Smell. But also, as Nicola already said, everybody I knew had sellotape around the power cable, because pulling that power cable in and out wore it out. So how many kids got shocks or shorted out the Spectrum from touching a live cable? I wonder if anyone out there got shocked from it.
I don't think I heard anything, but there was no internet to tell anybody anyway. So
right, I did something else on my Spectrum, which is probably quite sad. But I got these 2 cassettes. One was Teach Yourself French and Teach Yourself German. I don't know if anyone else has done this. Yeah. And I used to sit there and try and teach myself French and German. Wow. Yeah,
education stuff as well.
See, like I did do a bit of education as well.
Technically, you did use your Spectrum for
educational purposes. Yeah.
Probably the only one in the known universe.
Might have owned the cassette, but definitely didn't use it. So
it's like saying somebody used the printer, the Spectrum print, that silver paper. That
yeah, I bought one of those recently. Weirdly, it's just sitting up there. I need to connect it all.
Yeah. Did anybody actually print anything off on that print?
Yeah, I did at school. They had one at school, like one computer, one Spectrum, and one printer. And we a classroom of 30 kids. We did craft design and technology. And I drew a car. It was terrible, and it's on a Spectrum. And then I remember having it. I'd love to own that bit of silver paper where I did it, because it must have taken me about 10 lessons to do the whole thing. Probably queue up with the kids, just to print the thing off as well. Yeah. It's about an hour probably.
Yeah.
But other than that, who actually? I don't think that many people personally owned that. And I think that's the point of all this. We're now at that age, and hopefully a bit of pocket money in the back pocket, where we can go back and, if we missed it, buy the printer, buy the game we didn't have, or the special keyboard that we couldn't get hold of, let alone pay for.
Yeah. And you can play all the games though. That's the thing as well. You can pretty much whatever system you want to use, whether you're using an PC emulator or on a Mac or
very available
consoles out there now, you can play everything. I remember with the Wii, was it 2006? Suddenly there was a Commodore 64 app on it. You could download games like International Karate Plus and things like that, and sort of hearing, and it was called the Retro Channel.
Right.
I've actually always had a problem with the word retro in games, because you don't get it in the music industry. You're listening to the Beatles, you don't say I'm listening to retro music. Just listening to music, and to me games are games. But I totally get it. There's
it's all over Twitter now.
Yeah. It's true though, isn't it? Remember, it's not a game 40 years ago. It's still a game. It doesn't mean it's.
Yeah, I purposely didn't have it in the title, games you loved, because I did see a lot of retro this, retro that, and for it primarily to stand out, to be different. I went down the emotional route, which is kind of where this came from. But less about me and more about you as we end this lovely conversation.
Games are so big, though. I mean, what I was saying at the start of our journey of doing films about the games industry or about hardware, I always remember the BBC. What kind of led us to go down the road was we got a rejection, which was that games are too niche a subject to warrant a program on. And we sort of realised we
were rather annoyed about that.
Yeah, and we sort of thought, how disconnected are you from reality?
Well, they had a what did they have it on recently? Wasn't it a SNES with a NES cartridge in the top?
Yeah.
You see that?
No, did you? I
I didn't see it, but I know there's been things that we've seen.
Yeah, so they had set up an interview, and they had a Super Nintendo with an NES cartridge. I mean, who is on that in that studio not seeing that?
Yeah,
I have had it.
Player a cassette on a LP. It's just madness, you know.
Yeah.
I have had it with broadcasters saying to me, "It doesn't matter," and I'm like, "No, believe me, it really does. They will know.
Yeah.
They will roast you."
It's just like it just seems a bit light, you know, if you're not getting the very basics of technology. But anyway, I think people do make mistakes, and I think, you know, when you set it up, somebody could have just put it in there, and it was just kind of funny at the end. So these continuity things happen, don't they, occasionally? So,
but games are fun as well, and you know, I mean, we've been talking about the fact of how stories. If you take storytelling in games, for example, how that's evolved over the years, right from text adventures right the way through to the AAA titles with multiple endings, and you know, and it's really quite it's forged its own form of entertainment. Games sit separately from film, television, and music. You know, you can put those industries several times over in terms of revenue that the games industry gets, and it's you know, that's the thing. You never know. Just as it seems to potentially be getting stale, something comes out. A killer comes out. It never ceases to amaze you how creative game developers can be, young and old. You know.
No, you're true. I mean, you know, I do obviously help people promote things, etc. I've got some crazy wacky games coming through later this year. You won't even. I'll tell you after the recording, because it's that mad.
Yeah.
I love it, you know, especially on the indie side. They're going to chuck stuff out there. It's just going to blow your brains out, really, in a good way. So on that very note, it's been amazing. Like I kind of know you guys because, you know, like I say, I was at Earl's Court in 2014, and obviously talking to you before that. I mean, I've pretty known you for 13 years.
Yeah.
Stuff you told me today has been really insightful. Like, I didn't know, you know, Nicola, I didn't know what your favorite 3 games were, and I didn't know how you kind of started up and why you started it up, and obviously sounds a bit of a cliche, but passion that you both have for, you know, what you do, let alone the subjects. You live and breathe it, and that's clear to see. And I hope everybody stayed to the end of this conversation, and you know, I will do a piece in the description, so you can, if you want to go into certain parts of this conversation and what we cover, because we covered so much. It's like a documentary in its and I'd like to do a part 2 as well, where we, you know, dive into another subject, because we have our chats, us 3, and maybe start recording them a bit more. And
it's been really nice. I've enjoyed this.
It's been really good fun, I have to admit. But before we go, it's key and important, because I'm going to try and get this out before the weekend, which is a few days, only like 3 days before the current campaign ends. And do you want to say anything? I'll put the links obviously below, which are in there anyway, about the campaign to our audience on all channels. Will be on YouTube and across all our social, putting this out before we call it a day on this conversation.
I think what we'd like to say is, if you're a fan of the ZX Spectrum, or just a fan of gaming history in general, and about how developers create games or key moments in gaming history, please support our new project on the ZX Spectrum expansion pack on Kickstarter. We're doing 6 hours of all sorts of stories to do with the ZX Spectrum. And in fact, I did get a message today from a Commodore fan who watched one of our Commodore 64 Classic Game Insights, and he's just gone in and got the Rubber-Keyed Wonder, because even though he's never had a Spectrum in his life, he's just fascinated with the stories. And that's what we like to do, is tell these stories and have them preserved. You know,
it's a very good point. You don't have to be a Spectrum fan to like the Spectrum story. In fact, you know, if you're a team, you know, football team member of whatever, Liverpool, it doesn't mean you're not going to watch a Manchester United film about, you know, Ferguson or something. And I think it's the same if you've got a passion for gaming and retro gaming. Sorry to use the retro, classic gaming, shall we say? Then this is still for you. And obviously, you've got the Commodore movie which you want to put out there as a future project, hopefully not so far away as well?
Yeah.
No, as I said, we've got it sitting up there in the hope that any Commodore 64 fans out there, or fans of Commodore, because obviously we're going to be covering that story, please go into Kickstarter and click the notify me when launched button, because we want that to be 2000. When we get to 2000, we're going to look to get that launched.
Yeah. Wow, and that is a really interesting story. My God, the ideas that we've got for that film as well. So it would be good to be able to make that happen.
Yeah. And it's as simple as that. If you haven't got a Kickstarter account, it takes 2 seconds. You just put email, create a password. If you nobody's on Kickstarter is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier than Facebook, and you just do it. And what that will do, like you say, click the bell, and as soon as you go live, before you get a little update, and they'll be first in as well, won't they? If they do
That's right. They're first in, because Kickstarter, very quickly, Kickstarter is a unique place where obviously projects where you're looking for like-minded people to come and support your project and be part of it as it's made. It's not a pre-order store.
It's like coming on the journey with us.
You're going in there, you're reading how it's being made, you're seeing photographs and seeing early cuts and all sorts of other things. Sometimes the people will say, oh, I don't bother reading the updates, I just wait for it to go. And I always feel a bit sad, but not, they haven't got time and whatever to read everything. And that's, we all have busy lives, but I think with the Kickstarter, he's tried to become part of something. And you're also joining many other like-minded people, all sharing comments. Sometimes you just get comments about what people's favorite games were, and somebody might just get 15-20 minutes of fun. I forgot that game, I didn't know about that.
Also though, some people have written to us and said, did you know da, da, da? And it's like, no, we didn't know that. And it might be something that's actually ended up in one of the films, so we didn't know. So it's nice. We like hearing from people, and that is the nice thing about Kickstarter, that people are on that journey with us.
Sometimes we do a call for photographs. We need photographs of people with their spectrums or whatever. I mean, we were inundated with images of people with the spectrum, but that's the thing. The call went out through the Kickstarter. We got any photographs of themselves, and a number of them went in the film. And that's kind of, you wouldn't be part of that. If you just pre-order something on Amazon and you just get there for it to come through, it's totally different. The Kickstarter, you live and breathe it, and you can be as involved as you want. You don't have to read anything if you don't want to or don't have the time.
Just press the button and forget it, or just be continually involved. Just dip it.
Or some people might not read any updates for a few months, and then they go in and read them all in an hour, and I'm up to speed on that project now. So it's whatever you can really do. But we'd appreciate your support.
Fantastic. Well, again, just been a great chat today. And I hope we do this again. Some
really like to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
Get into the Commodore a bit deeper as well, because that's an interesting subject. And I know it's on the Kickstarter page. You'll be able to read all this, but you're getting the new Commodore guys, and there's some old members of the team. I don't want to mean old in age, but old. They were there originally.
They were.
But it's all on the page, guys. If you want to have a look, Anthony and Nicola have done a great job. Giving you a bit of a top line. There's more to it, obviously, when they get into the Kickstarter, but you can sign up, press that button, and it's as simple as that, really. So I will wrap it up now.
Lovely.
And hopefully Google Meet will do its job. I will stop the recording, but again, thanks for your time, and
been brilliant. Thank you.
Real pleasure. Really enjoyed it, Chris.
We'll stay on a bit and just finish off, but I'll see you on the next video.
Lovely. Look forward to seeing you, Chris.
Bye.
Bye-bye there.